Good afternoon, ladies and gents. My name is Mrs. Silya, and today we're going to look at the formal test preparation for grade 10, and it's term 3 already. Just one thing I want to tell you guys and girls, I know this can get long and you especially struggle to sit still for more than half an hour. So I suggest if you get tired or when you get tired, just pause this video, you go and get a snack, and then you can come back and we can talk again. The same with when you study, please tackle the information in biteable chunks for yourself, because otherwise you tend to give up. Just make it a shorter time frame when you study, because I know at this stage you are struggling to sit and we have to glue you to the chair. Okay, so let's start. Have a look here. Formal test preparation, grade 10, term 3. The first thing I just want to mention to you, and I want you to take note of, is that we have annual teaching plans, or the ATPs, that we work with. Né? So when your teacher explains the work, your teacher will be using this. It gives us exactly the information, the core concepts, what we must tackle and help you with. But now an interesting thing that you will see is that sometimes it is not mentioned here in the core concepts, but then they mention this in the activity. So when I prepared for you guys for this formal test preparation, I used what is here, and I tried to make it easier for you, more simple, not too complicated. And then if you have the basics, then you can complicate it for yourself. You can add the meat. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's start with this. Formal test preparation, and this is the format of our test, and now and forever until it changes again. We will have a section A, which, as you know, is the shorter types of questions, the multiple choice questions where you have to choose between A, B, C and D. There will be the terminology that is especially troublesome for some of you. So please, if you can make a list for yourself in your book, if your teacher is not doing it already, where all the terminology, the words and the definitions are together so that you can study them, because they're always going to be in the papers. Then we have this column or statement items where you have to fit column A with column B, and then sometimes at the end there's data response questions where they give you a picture, ask you questions about that and ask you to apply your knowledge. Alright, that is section A, 20 marks. Section B, we have 2 questions of 50 marks each. There's a variety of questions. You can get diagrams where you can label it. You can get a case study that you have to read. And please, ladies and gents, there's always 1 or 2 questions that you can get from the case study. So please, when you read this attentively and make sure you understand. Even if you have struggled and you don't understand the work, there's always somewhere where you can score a mark or 2. Very important also, there will be investigative questions where we will ask you about dependent, independent variable, or what should stay constant, what is reliability, what is validity. We're going to do that every single time, so you have to train yourself and practice this. So the total is 50 marks, and then obviously depending on the amount of paragraphs or words you have to read, it's 50 to 60 minutes. Alright, that's your test format. Some of the questions is going to be higher order questions. Some of them are going to be straightforward knowledge questions. But there will be just enough questions in there for you to pass if you maybe wonder about that. So all you need to do is to glue yourself to the chair, and then we can have a look. Okay, the first topic that we need to look at is the topic of biosphere. Okay, what is a biosphere? So now you guys and girls will know already that when we talk about a sphere, that is something that is round. And when we talk about bio, that is biology, that's the living things. So here in this picture, let me just move it a little bit for you so that you can see. We have a circle, biosphere, And the biosphere is made up out of the atmosphere, the geo or the lithosphere, and then the hydrosphere. Now in this biosphere, this is an area where you're going to find all the living organisms. Some that you can see with your naked eye, and some that is exceptionally small where you're going to need a microscope to see them. Okay, and this is also this portion of the earth in which living organisms can be found is also called the zone of life. Okay, where we have insects and birds and people and animals and fungi, all types of organisms. Okay, so biosphere, that's a term that you need to make your own. All right, now, in this biosphere, we just said it's made up out of different parts. Here's a lovely picture to show you this mountain with the snow on top, and there's some vegetation, some trees here. There we have the ocean, and then obviously the clouds and the air and the bird that's flying here. And when we look at the earth section here, we see the topsoil there and other types of soil, and then we get the continental crust. We get the upper mantle, and when we go more towards the center, we'll get the core of the earth. And when you have geography, you will know all of these things very well. There's the ocean, and then the soil that's at the bottom of the ocean is called the oceanic crust. Now, very important, what you need to remember, the lithosphere. The lithosphere is this whole section that we have here. The ground, the soil, the rocks, the outer part of the earth. And this is a rigid part, okay? You'll find different types of soil, you'll find different types of rocks. If that's your thing, you will know the different types of soil and layers that we can find here. So that is the lithosphere. Remember that one. All right. The biosphere is this whole area, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the lithosphere together. All right. Now the next one here is the atmosphere that we have here, and it's this section that you can see that is going from the soil or the water all the way up into the air, where you can see the stars at night. Okay. Now the atmosphere itself is also divided in quite a few spheres, but you don't have to know all of them, except again if you have geography, you will know this. We have the troposphere, the stratosphere, the mesosphere, etc. It's not relevant here, but so that you know the higher we go, the more different it becomes. The higher we go, the less the oxygen and the less the pressure, etc. We'll look at that a little bit later. So this area, the atmosphere, is the layer around the earth that is held in place by gravity. It protects life on earth, and it protects us against the UV radiation that comes through from the sun. All right, and in the atmosphere we have mostly nitrogen, we have oxygen, there can be CO2, and then obviously because of pollution and human impact, we can have methane as well that's causing problems, and obviously water vapor is also there in the atmosphere. That's the air part there. Now hydrosphere, this one, we only can see the ocean here, but the hydrosphere will be the total amount of water on the planet, all the water. So when we look at the ocean, we look at dams, we look at lakes, wetlands, ponds, and then obviously where we have snow and where we have glaciers and lots of ice. All of that, obviously when it melts, it becomes water. That is part of the hydrosphere. Okay. Biosphere made up out of lithosphere, hydrosphere, and the atmosphere. Okay, you need to know that. All right. Now, because of the different climates that we have in the world, we're going to have different sections with different vegetation. And vegetation means the type of grass, the type of trees, flowers, succulents that we're going to have there. And obviously when we have different types of vegetation, we will have different types of animals, birds or organisms that gets the food from the vegetation. Now, because we live in South Africa, I'm just interested in what is happening here at the moment. And you can see here's a nice colorful picture of the different biomes that we have. Now, the biomes, that's a specific area where the climate, the soil, the vegetation, and the organisms are grouped into that area because it represents certain characteristics that we will look at just now. Okay. Now, we have two biomes in general. We have the terrestrial biome and we have the aquatic. Now, aqua, or aqua, is water. That's why I put it here where we have the ocean. So the aquatic biomes will be the biomes, the living organisms and the climate, and whatever we will get inside the water, that is the aquatic biome. Terrestrial, terra means ground, soil, earth. So this whole section here is the terrestrial biome. All right, and there's our key. And yes, you have to study them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different types of biomes. And you need to be able to identify them. So make sure in your textbook there will be a map like this. Maybe your teacher asks you, put this picture in your question paper and then ask you to identify the different biomes. Obviously it won't be in color, but then you can see the different areas. And when you look here, you can see this red section. It is a lot. It covers most of our country, and that is also our largest biome, which is called the Savanna biome, and that's also where we're going to find the big five mostly. The big five, the animals that is attracting people to our country, and that also helps our tourism and our ecotourism. Okay. And there's one that is orange. It's also a large section. That one is called the Namakuru. The yellow one that you see here, obviously you're going to find our province, the Free State, in this area, and that's mainly grassland. All right. Then this blue section here, that is actually divided or broken up by the pink one. This blue section is called the succulent Karoo. We will get a lot of succulents there. I'll show you now. And then the pink one here that spreads a little bit towards Cape area. That is the fynbos area, which is also a very important area for us. You don't get it in the rest of the world or the country. And then you will also see this green section. It's small patches that you see here. That's the forest. And always remember, when I see forest, I see big, big, big trees. I see elephants, the Naisnaluri. It's that area where you can sort of get lost in the woods, and there's a canopy. It makes a roof of trees and leaves so that the sun just gently can come through every now and again. All right. So there we have that one, and then this blue one that we have here is called the thicket, bossa. Okay, so there we have forest and thicket, and I'll show you what's the difference between the two because it can be confusing. I say again, ladies and gents, yes, you have to study them. You must be able to identify them. And now you will see you need to be able to mention a few things regarding organisms, vegetation, temperature that we will find in these areas. All right, let's look at the first one that we have here. Okay, I put the two together because it sometimes confuse you guys. We have the Savanna biome, Savanna, grassland. Now, when you look at this, you see, yes, there's grass. Yes, here's grass as well. Okay, but this is where we are staying in the Free State. Yes, there's some, I don't want to say big mountains, but we do see that, and we just see grass all over the place. We don't see a lot of trees like in the Savanna. Yes, there's trees in the Free State, but it's not the same as the one that we see here in the Savanna. So let's have a look. Please remember to study. The largest biome in our country is the Savanna biome. And then maybe if your teacher asks us what is the name of the biome that you live in, and it's the Free State, then you will know it is the Grasslands. Okay, so let's just have a look at the differences. Now, first of all, for both of them, the summers are hot and wet, meaning it's going to rain. And then in the Grasslands, we can have hailstorms, we can have thunderstorms, rain and wind, and then in the winter, obviously for the savanna and the grassland, we can have cold weather, and then in the savanna it can become dry, and here in the Free State we sometimes have frost, and then we know now, yeah, it's very, very cold. All right. Then the different types of soil, depending on the different areas in the savanna or the grassland, we will find here in the savanna mostly sandy soil, they say, and it's moderate in nutrients. And in some of the parts they have rich humus ground filled with nutrients. Obviously then plants will grow better there. And then the Free State as well, it's fertile. The different types of soil will give you different types of grass. And then they talk about something here that we call leaching. Now leaching means that when the water is traveling inside or into the soil, sometimes what happens, it's leaching into the groundwater. And then if some of the nutrients dissolve into the water, it's taken out of the soil and it goes into the groundwater as well. Okay, we'll come back to that. Then vegetation, maybe it helps you to think about vegetables that you don't want to eat. So vegetation is the plants, and then there you see we have grass and we have trees in the savanna. We have the thorn tree with those very long thorns. We have the marula tree where they actually use the fruits, and then we have the baobab tree, which is a beautiful tree and huge tree that you find here in this area. Okay, so make sure you know what is the difference between the two, if you will be able to identify them and to say, you know, which one is which. Largest biome and the Free State. Okay. The next one that can be confusing to children is the Nama Karoo and the succulent Karoo. Okay, now when you look here, you can see immediately in the Nama Karoo we have different types of shrubs, I want to say, and tree-like succulents. They also take a very long time to grow, and they don't need a lot of water. You can see there, it looks more like stones and rocks and sand and soil, and not a lot of grass. All right, and this is the Karoo. And then you find these lovely specimens of plants here, the stone plants. They look like stones. This one is now actually flowering. So the fact that they look like stones is to protect them against animals that maybe want to eat them, because you will find the water inside the plants. And then here the succulent Karoo, here you can see the Namaqualand daisies, beautiful flowers. And people go for the ecotourism. They go and they visit Namaqualand and they go and look at the flowers when it's time for them to bloom. That is why I have that flower there as well. So now let's look at the climate of these two sections. Now the Nama Karoo, high temperatures in summer, very hot. In winter it's freezing cold as soon as the sun sets. And then the same with the succulent Karoo. Summer it's hot. You can see and imagine. You see there the clouds is coming together already. And when it rains, it doesn't rain a lot. Okay. And then the winter it's extremely cold. Now when it comes to the soil, there's different types of soil again, and they say it's infertile soil, a thin layer of soil over the rock because of wind, and when it rains the water carries it away. They say these areas are rich in lime. The same here on this side, and here they talk about erodes easily because of the rocky sections and the soil, the sand that is on top of the rocky sections. When there's water, it just travels with the water away and then it erodes, or then when the wind blows, it also takes it away. Okay, and here at the bottom with the vegetation, the plants, you see there's a word there that we're talking about. Xerophytes. That's the type of plants that you will find here. It's the plants that we put in this group. Now, plants can't live on zero water, but what I want you to remember here is that they almost need zero water. In other words, they only need a little bit of water. You don't have to give them a lot of water, or they don't need to survive on a lot of water. And that would be the succulents that we talk about, the stone plant. Here you find it. Here they talk about succulents. They talk about the daisy, the Namakwa daisy. it's all plants that adapted to the area. And then they talk about the lichens here. Now lichens, you will find they grow on stones and rocks. It's a structure that sometimes forms a pattern, and it looks as if something is growing on the rock, which, you know, the rocks are very hot, but the lichens, then that is what you will find on the rocks there. All right, Nama karoo and succulent karoo. Then the next one, the two that can also be confusing, is the forest biome and the thickets. You see, this one also looks like a forest, although there's some dry areas there. All right. The forest biome is the smallest biome. Remember, I told you it makes me, or I think about the Knysna forests, where you can actually, when you walk in those forests, it feels as if you're inside a room with a roof. It protects you from sunlight if that is a problem, and then it's moist, and sometimes there's a lot of fog as well, and it rains throughout the year. And there again you can see, in order for plants, especially these plants, to grow very well, they need a lot of rain in this forest. And then obviously it's rich in nutrients, because the leaves that falls from the tree, that falls on the soil, it makes like a carpet. And then animal droppings as well, droppings, the feces that goes back into the soil, that is recycled and gives us a lot of nutrients. Okay, and then the vegetation here at the bottom, the Outeniqua yellowwood, that's a tree, and it forms a canopy like a roof, a layer at the top where all the trees blocks the sunlight. It only filters through a little bit. And then we have another type of plant, the epiphytes. The epiphytes are included here, the air. It's air plants. It looks as if they are growing in the air, but because of all the nutrients and organisms that we're going to find in the forest biome, sometimes these plants, they start to grow on the tree trunk or on the branch of the tree hanging from there. It is not part of the tree, it's separate from the tree, but it's called epiphyte, and that is like the air plants. All right. Now the thicket section, when you look at the thicket, you see there's some browner areas. It's not as green as with the forest. And then certain areas, it looks, you can see there's rocks and there's smaller shrubs as well. So here they tell you that the climate, obviously there's going to be rain to sustain this type of thicket, but it's not enough to become a forest. So it's not sustainable. It rains and then it doesn't rain. So it all depends on the amount of rain, which is not continuous. Okay. Then there's nutrients, the leaves drop, we have animal droppings that we've talked about, and then we can find there the spekboom, which is a tree that gives a lot of oxygen. It uses up a lot of CO2 and not a lot of water, so it's always a good shrub or tree to plant. There's a lot of open spaces in between, as you can see there, shorter trees and no distinct layers. You're not going to find that canopy that you find in the forest biome. All right, remember the forest biome, the smallest biome in our country. Now, the last one here, fynbos. Okay, fynbos in the Cape region. There you can find all different types of beautiful flowers. It's endemic, meaning you can only find it there. And then let's have a look. I'll explain now to you why I have the fire here as well. Okay, so there we have the fynbos. The winters is cold and wet, the summers hot and dry. The soil, we have different types of soil. They say it's infertile, leaching of nutrients into the groundwater, and it inhibits the growth of larger plants because the nutrients go deeper into the soil. Then the type of flowers that we get here, the proteas, which you will know about, the pincushion that are included here in case you don't know how it looks. And here we have the largest number of plant species of all the biomes. So there's a big variety, and many times there's fires, and the fires actually just helps that the fynbos can come out even brighter and better after the fires. Okay, so that is the different types of biomes. You have to study this. It is study work. So please put your buttocks on the chair, make summaries, and study the different biomes so that you will be able to identify them. Okay. Now, ecotourism, it's a type of tourism that we get in our country that can bring in a lot of money. It provides a lot of jobs, and it means that people are touring in our country to look at the different types of biomes and the vegetation and also the animals that you can find there. For instance, here at the bottom, I have the savanna. It's an example of the savanna. There you see the grass and you can see the trees. And there we have a giraffe. This is also the biome where you're going to find the big five. And obviously, people come to our country to come and look at these animals. Okay, yeah, you can see a photographer taking photos. Now, this one that we have here with the gemsbok, that is the Namakuru, where you can see all the flowers, the Makwalan daisies, all the beautiful colors, and people go there. And then obviously when they go there, they have to sleep somewhere and they have to eat somewhere, and that provides an income to people that otherwise would not have a job. So ecotourism is a good thing. Here's a picture of the fynbos biome. We have the flower and a protea that I talked about just now. Also, people love to go to the Cape region for several reasons, because of the ocean and the beautiful, beautiful landscape, and Table Mountain. Obviously, that also provides people with an income because, like I said, they have to stay somewhere and they have to eat somewhere. And this one that I have here is the forest biome. Here we have a river, and it already, when you look at the water, you can see it looks cold. So we will find maybe different types of fish in there. People can come here just to, hike in the forest, or sometimes people come here to fish. Whatever the interests are, they will come, and like I said, they will have to stay somewhere and they'll have to eat somewhere. And obviously that's not for free. They will have to pay. So it helps the industry, it provides jobs, it brings in money, it improves our economy. Okay, that is the ecotourism that they talk about. Now, environment. We're going to look at the environment here. Our environment. Look at the earth, that we have to look after. Now, the word environment, it comes, this section, enviro. It comes from the word that means to encircle. In other words, around the earth like that, to encircle, or to be surrounded. That's the area that encircles us, that surrounds us. Now, what is the environment? What is the definition? The sum total of all living and non-living elements and the effect that the influence or that they have on human life. Okay, then obviously the influence that we will have on them as well. Okay, living and non-living elements and the relationship between these different elements, and how we sometimes disadvantage one another. Environment, term that you must study. All right, next one. Ecosystems. Ecosystem is a system, ecology system. Ecology is the study of the environment. So this is the system of the environment. Have a look. Biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. Here you can see we have trees, we have the atmosphere, the sun. Here's a kangaroo. They talk about insects, protozoans, bacteria, plankton, those that you can't see with the naked eye. Underneath the water, there we have some water plants. Here's a rotting log where we're going to find decomposers. There they even have fungi, the mushrooms. I see there's a snake basking in the sun. It looks like a snail, although it's a very big one. Termite mounds. We're showing you this is an ecosystem where the different types of producers, consumers, decomposers, all of them work together. We'll have water cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, all of that you can find in the ecosystem. Different species, populations that work together in order to get a place to stay, to get food, and to survive, and obviously to breed. That's our ecosystem. All right. Now, very important, you have to study this. An ecosystem is divided in two types. Biotic, which is the living, and abiotic, non-biotic, non-living. So, let's have a look. You must be able to list this. When we look at the biotic factors, we are looking at the producers. Now, the word producers, I mean, you guys know it means to produce something, to make something. So, producers are going to produce their own food. And you know already the process that we use is called photosynthesis. Synthesis, the making of something. Photo refers to light, using light to make something and to make food. I don't know if you can remember. We start with carbon dioxide plus water, and that is going to give C6H12O6, which is glucose, which is the sugar. And then what do we need as humans? Oxygen. So that is the chemical equation for photosynthesis. So the glucose is the food that animals need, and that's the gas that we need. And in order to make that, we need water and we need carbon dioxide. Okay? But water and carbon dioxide will be part of the non-living factors. All right? But the producers make this in order for us the plants to have food to grow, the plants to have CO2 to make, obviously there's energy involved, there's enzymes involved. We need sunlight. Without sunlight, this cannot happen. And what is the other one I'm looking for? Chlorophyll. That is the green pigment that you will find in the chloroplast inside the plant. All right. Now, when a plant, that's mostly plants, pretend that to be a plant. So the plant, they produce food. They get energy and sunlight from the sun. They get the water through their roots and other nutrients, and now they start growing. Now, the next factor that's going to come into the picture here is the consumers. Consumers consume. They use the food, and they rely on others for their energy and food supply. Okay, to get energy, to get food, to get water, whatever they need to survive. Now here they also talk about different types. The herbivores, you've studied this in the primary school already. Herbivores, organisms that's eating plants. Carnivores, organisms that's eating meat. Scavengers are those organisms that is feeding on refuse or what we call carrion, decaying flesh, okay, dead animals, the scavengers, all right. Then we also have the insectivores. Insectivores is animals that feeds on insects and worms predominantly. Omnivores, that omni meaning plants and meat, both, okay. And then decomposers, very, very important organisms. They are decomposing, they are breaking down all organic material. So whatever is left after the scavenger, the herbivores, the carnivores, insectivores and omnivores are finished, the decomposers will break that down so that it can be recycled back into the earth so that we can use it again. Okay, so nothing is wasted. And that is now the living section, things that's alive. The non-living section, the abiotic factors, will be the following. Now let's have a look here. There's one that I'm looking for, altitude and aspect as well, aspect. Now they will be the we're going to look at them now, physiographic section or factors. And then the other one that we're going to have here, the soil, will be the edaphic. You need to study that. And then this would be the climate. This is climate, influences the climate. Temperature, wind, water and light. Soil is edaphic, and also the pH and things like that. And the slope and the altitude and the aspect is physiographical factors. Okay, we're going to look at them now. All right. Please make sure that you know what is biotic and what is abiotic. Biotic factors, the living things. There we have actually a food chain, although they put it in a circle. We start here with the producers. The producers get energy from the sun. There's chlorophyll inside the plant in the chloroplast. There's water in the ground, the roots will bring it, and then we have the process of photosynthesis. It's making food, it's making energy, will be available, oxygen is given off, and then our primary consumers. Remember now, ladies and gents, when you are ready to go to school, you go to the primary first, then to the secondary school, then to the tertiary, the university, if you're lucky enough. Ne? And then if you still want to study, you can carry on and study some more. And that is what the quaternary consumer is. It follows after tertiary. But you need to remember the first one, that is now consuming the producers, the plants. That is the primary consumer, the first one. And there you can see the insects, they are going to eat plants. And then they will get energy, they will get food. Then the secondary consumer is the consumer that consumes the primary consumer, which is the frog here. The frog's going to eat the insects. Then the snake will eat the frog. It's the tertiary consumer. And then this eagle will come, and this eagle can eat the snake. And if something happens to the eagle dies or can't get food or water, the eagle is going to be decomposed. Maybe scavengers will first eat whatever they can find, and then the decomposers will start. The bacteria will start to work in on the skeleton, the decomposed body of the eagle, and then it will be recycled so that it can go back into the soil. Normally when we see mushrooms growing somewhere, we know that the soil is very fertile, rich in nutrients. Okay, biotic factors. Now let's look at the abiotic factors. That's normally a little bit more difficult. Here's the first group that I talked about, physiographic factors. Okay, now aspect is the first one. Now aspect is a difficult concept. Go and sit and read about it in your textbook. Try to make it your own. Ask your geography teacher. They also have that in geography. It's all about angles and ratios and things like that. But for us, for instance, remember now, we are in the southern hemisphere. Now, aspect will be different in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere. But because we are in the southern hemisphere, I'm only looking at the aspect in the southern hemisphere. Okay. Now, what is aspect? First of all, it refers to the position of an area in relation to the sun or the wind or to wave action. That is now when it's at the seaside. All right. Now let's talk about the sun rays here. Now the sun rays are coming in here at an angle. And here we have a mountain or a hill. Now this is going to affect the I want to say the amount of water, the amount of sun rays, the type of vegetation that we're going to have there. And that is all because of the aspect, the angle that the sun rays is coming in here. Because when we look at this side, this north side, and this is the south side of the hill or the mountain, this side is going to be warmer because the sun rays, it goes directly to this area. It's concentrated there. Okay. This is going to be a warm area. It's going to be a drier area because even though it rains, because it's so hot, the water is going to evaporate. And there we will find many xerophytic plants. Remember, zero doesn't mean they need zero water. It's almost zero. They just need a little bit of water. Okay. On this side, on the southern part, it's going to be cooler. Look there, the area that the sun rays have to cover is a larger area. So I almost want to say that it's more diluted. It's cooler, it's colder, it's it's not as hot. Okay, it will be wet, there will be rain, it's in the shade. You can imagine if the sun is shining from that angle, this hill will cast a shade, a shadow to that side. So there we will find shade-loving plants. It will be very green and there will be an abundance of plants, lots of them. Now, unfortunately, the picture that I have here for you is from the northern hemisphere. So it's the other way around. I hope you can forgive me, but maybe it helps to understand this. Okay, so it's the other way around. Here they have the warmer area, the drier area on this side. on that side and on that side. And then on the left side, each time, that is the highest part of the hill or the mountain there. On that left side, you will find the cooler part, the shady part, the plants. So immediately you can see less, almost no plants, and more plants there. But this is going to be the northern hemisphere. So it's swapped around from what is happening here with us, the southern hemisphere. Okay, so please go and study and make sure you understand what is that. The next one, the slope. Now, the slope is the gradient, the angle. If you have to run up a hill, you will immediately realize what is the slope. When it's a steep hill, you suffer, okay? It makes you tired very quickly. So this slope that you can see here, the angle is steeper than this one. This one looks more gradual. Okay, so now what is going to happen here? Because of the slope, it's going to influence what plants and how the plants grow here. If it rains now, rain, remember, water is precipitation. So the blue arrows that you see here represents water. So the steeper the slope like you see here, the faster the water is going to flow. Yes, some of the water will be taken in, but most of the water is going to run off. And what is worse is that it's going to take the fertile topsoil with it, because normally it's loose. And if there's not a lot of plants that's keeping the soil, then more soil will go downhill with the water. Okay, so erosion can happen here. This one where the slope is less steep, the water is going to run down slower. And it gives time for the water to go in deeper into the soil. Okay, because it takes longer, it moves slower. Some of the water can go into the soil. So this is how this is going to influence the plants that's going to grow there, because more water, more plants. Okay, slope is the gradient or the steepness of a particular surface of the earth. All right, study work. Make sure you know this. All right. Then the last one when it comes to abiotic factors is altitude. Now, altitude is how high you go above sea level, the height of land above sea level. If you live at sea level, it means it is at sea level. And as we go towards where we are living in the Free State, we go higher than sea level. Not as high as this mountain though, okay, but we are not living at sea level. You're only living at sea level when you are at the sea, obviously. Okay, now what I want you to remember, there is three things, and it shows here in this picture. When I'm close to sea level, look at that, I want to say representation. Those dots represent oxygen molecules. So when I'm closer to sea level, I see there's quite a lot of oxygen molecules. So the altitude is lower, the pressure is greater, and there's more oxygen. Now you're going to ask me, how is the pressure now greater here? Imagine the amount of air that is now pushing down on you, the pressure of the air on you. Look at that amount of pressure that is pressing on you. So there's more pressure. Now if you now, let's say you are here, high on the mountain top. What's going to happen here is there's going to be less oxygen. See, less oxygen molecules. There's going to be less pressure. Look at the amount of air that is on top of you. Less pressure. And then obviously less oxygen. That is why, if that is your thing, if you know about Kilimanjaro, where the people actually go and they climb the mountains, as they go higher, they move slower, and they use these oxygen tanks because there's less oxygen in the air, so they need additional oxygen for their body, for cellular respiration, for energy. And here you can also see a guy that is running, and people say that he's into sport, that when you are from the sea level and you exercise or you practice higher, then what happens is that your body adapts and it makes more red blood cells in order to carry more oxygen, because your body realizes that there's less oxygen in the air, so it needs to adapt, it needs to excuse me, provide the body with more oxygen, so it makes more red blood cells. So sometimes when athletes have to participate at sea level, they exercise or they practice at a certain level above sea level so that their bodies can adapt and make more oxygen. So when they come back, it feels like it's easier to run or to exercise. If you also jog, you would have realized that when you jog at sea level, it feels as if you can actually breathe better than when you're running higher up. All right, that is altitude. The next one, still altitude. I just want to show you how plants can be adapted to altitude. Here's a nice picture of snow. You can see the mountains there at the back, and then you can see these trees. Some of you will say it's a Christmas tree, others will know it's a pine tree. Now, first of all, the shape of this tree is like a cone. If this tree is less surface area there and more surface area there, it means that when the snow falls, it sort of falls off the tree. It won't stay on the tree, because when you look here, you can see there's a structure and there's a big chunk of, almost I said cheese, a big chunk of snow on top of this structure, this house. But when I look at this tree and these trees here, you can just see spots like a little bit of snow here. And that is because of their overall shape. And then obviously the leaves that we find on these trees, we call them needles, pine needles. They look like this. So the snow can't get stuck to the needles, they glide off. And that works for the plants here. Okay, and the other thing that's actually important here is that the roots are adapted in such a way that when there's water, it uses the water so that this plant can grow on these different levels. Now, another thing I just want to show you, here's a structure, a mountain, there's the snow at the top, there's the tree line. So this means that after that section, you're not going to find trees anymore because of the high altitude, less oxygen, the cold, the wind, all of those things. There's not going to be trees there, like high up on the mountains. Then this zone where you find the alpine trees, the Christmas trees, it's called the alpine zone. And then when you go down, you'll see more of this, some different types of shrubs and Christmas trees, alpine or pine-like trees. Then the next level, the temperate zone, there the temperature will also be better. So when you live in that area, there will be bigger trees. And then the subtropical and the tropical zone will be close to the equator. And there we have an abundance of plant life. So altitude influences the climate, it influences the type of vegetation. All right, study that. Another example I just want to show you here when it comes to altitude. We looked at high up in the mountains now where there's snow. So at the coast, where it's nice and warm, you can get the snake that we call the black mamba or also the green mamba. You'll find them there. They like the warmer climates. Okay, so the altitude influences the type of animals that you get there. They go and stay where they like it. All right, here we have a picture of a fish. It's called a trout. You get a rainbow trout and a brown trout. It's also good for ecotourism. People go and they fish, and I want to say it's sort of more a clean type of fishing where you don't have the bait and all of those things that you have to put on. It is not organic. They normally have flies that people make themselves, and then these fish, they actually go for the fly. And you will find them in the cooler, clear waters of mountains, higher altitude and less oxygen. You won't find them where there's snow, but between the snow area and the coastal area, you will find this or these fish, and that their habitat will be there because that's the factors that they like, and it's influenced by altitude. Okay, that's abiotic. Still abiotic. You do this ever since primary school. You are so sick of types of soil, and there we have them. Loam soil, sandy soil, clay soil. Now, ladies and gents, this always makes me think of those stories that they tell you when you are younger, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, where the porridge was too hot, too cold, and just right. Now, it works with soil the same. Sandy soil is not right. There's too little bit of water in that one. Clay soil is not right because there's too much water in this one. And the loam soil, they say, is just right because there's enough humus, there's enough air, and there's enough water for plants to grow. Okay, now let's have a look. Abiotic factors, the edaphic factor, which is the different soil types. The three types of soil is loam soil, sandy soil, clay soil. Now, the first thing we can look at is the pH. That is, you must know the pH scale. It starts from 0 and then it goes up. Okay, it goes to 7, and that is where we have neutral. So when it's less than 7, it's acidic, and when it's more than 7, it's alkaline. Okay, that's also primary school work. Let me just do this so that you can see. So when we look at loam soil, this one, it can be acidic to neutral. The sandy soil is alkaline, and the clay soil can be more acidic. Okay, so that is your table that you study. The humus content, that's the amount of nutrients. Here they say it's very high in the clay soil, and because it's so high, what's going to happen here, it can, sometimes because of the water, that's waterlogged, there's too much water. So there may be a lot of humus, but many times the plants cannot use it because of this. Sandy soil, low amount of humus, and loam soil, medium, just the right combination that plants like. So many times people will take sandy soil and clay soil and combine the two to make the loam soil. Okay. The texture, like I said now, combination of sandy and clay, you will have this coarse texture, and then you will have this fine texture together where it's parts of leaves of animals that you find in between. Water retention capacity, keeping water back, that is water retention, when you keep water back. Now in sandy soil, think about the sandy beaches, the water goes right through, the water retention capacity is low. In clay soil, the water retention capacity is very high because it's waterlogged. It keeps the water together. And then if you want to know if you have clay soil, you take the soil and you make it a lump like this. And when you have the lump and it stays like a ball, then you know it's clay soil. If it's a ball at first and then it crumbles, you know it's loam soil. And when it's sandy soil, it won't make a ball at all. Okay. Then lastly, the air content, the amount of air inside. As you can imagine, between sandy soil, there's lots of spaces for air. In clay soil, there's not a lot of spaces. And in medium soil, it's just right, just enough of everything that a plant needs. It keeps enough water, there's enough air, there's enough humus, so the plants grow mostly better in the loam soil. All right. Now we get to the climatic factors, the factors that's influenced by your climate. Now, first of all, the day length and the seasonal changes, it just means the following. In summer, we have longer days, meaning sunlight, more sunlight. Plants need sunlight. So the longer the day, the more sunlight the plant gets. And then seasonal changes means in winter it's cold, in summer it's warm. Okay, more sunlight, more direct sunlight in summer. In winter, the intensity of the sun is less. Okay, because it's further away. Then temperature, effect of the day, seasons, night, exactly the same. So light and temperature, how warm it is, how cold it is, how much light or the amount of light that you get, it influences how plants grow. Here we have succulents, xerophytes. They don't need a lot of water to grow. So this one actually found in between the rocks, little bit of sand, and obviously the water will flow into that crevice if it rains. So it gets water there. Here we have the hydrophytes. Hydro means water. Plants that is on water. These plants are adapted in such a way that they float on the water. Here we look at the leaves. The leaf is nice and big, large surface area for photosynthesis. And here we have the mesophytes. Meso means middle. Meso means middle. So it's in between xerophytes and hydrophytes. They don't need a little bit of water, or they don't need too much water. They just need a medium, the correct amount of water to be able to grow. The plants that's grouped into this section is the mesophytes. Okay, then we're looking at climatic factors. Now, climate again, water, atmosphere, wind. Now, wind first of all, ladies and gents, where there's plants and the wind blows, you can see sometimes the wind is so strong it breaks the tree or it unroots the tree because of the force of the wind. Some of the, the flowers can lose their petals, the leaves can be ripped, so it damages plants, okay? The wind can damage plants, and obviously it influences transpiration. If the wind is blowing around a plant, obviously the moisture is taken away, and then more transpiration will take place, and the plant can dry up, all right? Soil erosion, loss of topsoil, the wind can blow it away. That is how the climate, that is how wind will influence this. Atmospheric gases, that can be different gases like oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. Now, as you know already, we need oxygen and we need carbon dioxide. Plants use carbon dioxide to make oxygen, so that influences. It's an abiotic factor. Then when it comes to the nitrogen gas, the form that nitrogen gas, the chemical form that it is in, plants cannot assimilate or take or absorb nitrogen in that form. It needs to be changed to the form of a nitrate. Okay, then plants can take it in and use it and make amino acids, a nutrient that they need. Okay, that's the gases. Then water. Water is needed for photosynthesis. You know that already. There's some aquatic plants. Aquatic meaning they are living in water or on water, on top of the surface. They are called hydrophytes. Can you still remember what we call the plants that is in the air, that lives in the so-called air high up? We call them epiphytes. And then aquatic plants is hydrophytes. Aquatic, how is animals adapted to stay in water? They have gills and they have fins. And then water terrestrial, we have xerophytes, meaning plants don't need a lot of water. And then also we find scales on animals to protect evaporation of water out of their body, and we will find them in the very warm areas like a desert or Karoo. And then exoskeleton is like a hard skeleton, you know that is for protection. And also one of the disadvantages is that it cannot grow. They normally shed the skeleton, but this skeleton is also like armor. It protects the animal, but then less water will evaporate out of this animal's body. Okay, that's climate. Please remember. Now, when it comes to abiotic factors, just something else that I want to mention, the wetlands and the estuaries. The children struggle, they don't know what this really is and what is the difference between the two. Now, wetlands is just what it means. It is a piece of land that is very wet. The water, the soil is so locked or saturated with water, it's not going away, it's not moving away, so it stays in that area, and because of that, that land surface is covered with water throughout the year. And this is a picture of a wetland. Okay, so they normally say a wetland is nature's kidney. You know, almost the kidney cleans your body from all types of waste. So this is what the wetlands is doing as well. It's filtering all contaminated water. It's making it pure. It's making it clean. And what is wonderful is just look at this. It's very, very green. It means that this ecosystem is abundant. There's lots of food. There will be lots of organisms and plant life. So it's fabulous for biodiversity. And wetlands you find inside the country. Estuaries is a different story. It's also like a wetland, a type of wetland, but you find it next to the ocean. That is the transition zone between the river and the sea or the ocean. Okay, that section that we find there, we call a estuary. All right, just to make sure you know what is the difference between a wetland and estuaries. All right, ladies and gents. Now that's the different factors abiotic factors. Now, you know the influence of those factors. Now we have to look at the animals and where they get energy and what they do with the energy. Now, you do this ever since primary school, so I think some of you may be sick and tired, but let's go through this. Energy flow, so how energy moves. Now, normally what we do is we have what we call a food chain. Now, this is a food chain, although it's not horizontal, it's vertical. And then the only thing that I want to add here is the actual arrows that's supposed to show us the movement of energy, where energy is given to the next one, transported to the next one, and then every time energy is given to the next level or the next layer, then some of the energy is lost because the animal is using it for bodily processes, and not all of it goes to the next level. Now let's have a look here. We start at the bottom with primary producers. They will have a lot of energy because they get their energy from the sun, they photosynthesize, they make it. Okay? So here we have the phytoplankton, that is plant-like plankton, and then we have the zooplankton. Zoo refers to the animal-like. Ne? So first we start with the plant here. Let's look at this one. This is the terrestrial on earth. This one is the one aquatic in water. So we start with plants. The plants will be eaten by small animals like your mussels, crabs, those, what do they call them, the brooms of the ocean, shrimps and so forth. Then the carnivores, smaller fish that will eat those small organisms, animals, and then the bigger fish that's going to eat the smaller fish, and then it goes on like that. This one is the top of the food chain, and this one is the bottom of the food chain. And every time when we go from one level to the next level, there's some energy lost. Some energy will be used. All right? The same here with the one on land. We start with the plant, then the locust will eat the plant, and the mouse will eat the locust. The snake will eat the mouse, and then this, I don't know if it's a hawk, the eagle, what it is, that is catching the snake, and then it eats it. All right, that's the top of the food chain. Now, when you look at the amounts here, the joule, remember energy, the unit for energy is joules, so it is measured, and that's the unit, or the symbol is J. So when we get sunlight, look at that. 6 zeros, 1,000,000 joules of sunlight is available. And then when the plant makes the food, it has 10,000. But when the locust eats the plant, it produces 1,000. And then the mouse only 100, and then the snake only 10. So every time when I go from one level to the next level, I'm losing energy. That is energy flow then. Ne? That is how the energy flow from one level to the next level. Now, the food chain, I'm just quickly going to look at this again. You know this, you do this ever since you do NS or natural sciences. Grass, grasshopper, frog, python, an eagle. Here we have carrots, rabbit, fox, lion, corn, rat, and owl. So you can have longer food chains, you can have smaller food chains. They all influence one another. If I now take one of the components away, then the grasshopper will have less food. I mean, the frog won't eat the grasshopper, so the grasshopper will eat all the grass. So we'll get less grass at one stage. Then when there's no frog, the snake is not going to have frogs to eat. So the snake may die, and we don't have snakes then. All right, if it can't find something else to eat. So every time, every link in this chain, it has an influence, and it's very important. Okay. Now the next one is the food web, like a spider's web. It's much bigger. Okay. We start here at the bottom with the grass, which is the primary producers, which is providing food. It's making food. Then the grasshoppers, etc., they are going to eat. They are the next level. Then we have the secondary consumers, the tertiary consumers, and each level of food is called a trophic level. Trophic is food, where they get a food level. And you can see how complicated this whole structure is. So it's easy to say when something becomes extinct or whatever, it's not such a big thing. You don't think it's a big thing, but it actually is, because it's going to influence the whole food web, the whole ecosystem. They rely on one another for food. Okay? And then the last one here is the food pyramids. You can see this is a pyramid. The bottom level, trophic level 1, is the widest one because the most energy, 10,000 kilocalories. There's the grass. Then when we go to the next level, some of the energy is lost. And as we go towards the top, even more energy is lost. And this one is on the top of the food chain. And there will be, in total, the amounts will be less. The most what we have here, we will have a lot of grass. Then we will have a lot of locusts to eat the grass, but less. Every time it becomes less. So that is just to show you the different food levels, the different trophic levels, and then the amount of animals, how that can decrease, and then also how energy can get lost through every level. All right. Now, again, ladies and gents, the different cycles, water cycle, carbon cycle, oxygen cycle. You know this, you do this ever since the primary school. So please go and make sure you understand what the different words mean. Go through this again. Don't just assume, just refresh. You have to know certain terms. What is precipitation? What is evaporation? What is transpiration? Okay, so where do we get water from? We get water from precipitation. We get hail, we get rain, we get frost, anything that gives us water, snow. When snow dissolves, it's water. Okay, and then it goes into the soil, it goes into the ground. Some of it runs off groundwater to the sea, to the rivers. Then evaporation starts, or on land transpiration, where plants will give off excess water. That goes into the atmosphere, and when these particles come together, they clock together, precipitation, they form clouds, and then the clouds become heavy with water, it rains again, and this is the cycle. Please go and have a look. I say again, precipitation, evaporation, transpiration, and then what is precipitation as well. Make sure you know all the different terms. Next one, the nitrogen cycle. This one is very, very important. Please, ladies and gents, go and have a look. I said earlier, nitrogen, that is the chemical formula for nitrogen. You find it in the atmosphere. But the form that it is in, the chemical form that it is in, plants cannot absorb nitrogen in that form. They need it to be changed. It's just like you want to eat meat, now you want to eat the whole sheep as it is with bones and wool and whatever. You can't eat it in that form. It needs to be processed so that you can only eat the meat. So that's the same with nitrogen. Nitrogen must be changed. It must be changed into what we call NO3, which is nitrates. Okay, that's nitrates. You write it like this, the spelling, there's an A. All right, so they need to be changed. And then you can see what happens here is simulation. It's taken up by the roots. It's forming amino acids. The plants can grow. And then whatever this is, this rodent will eat the plants. It will get the amino acid and it can carry on and have protein synthesis and those things happening. We have this cycle. Now when this animal or this plant now dies, we will have decomposers that is now going to work on the nitrates. Okay, the nitrates needs now to change this again. We need this now to be NO2, nitrifying bacteria. There we have nitrates, and here we have nitrates as well, but look at the spelling. We have NO3 and NO2. The spelling is different, and that is then obviously important. Let me write this one here. So when it's NO2, there's an I. When it's NO3, there's an A. I don't know if you can see it that clearly. So that is the chemical structure that's different. And every time when we work with this, it is like an animal and an organism that cannot consume this because it's not in the correct form. All right, I say again, nitrogen, it needs to be changed into nitrates, NO3, then the plants can take it in. When the plants die, plants are now in NO3 shape, so it needs to, or not NO3, in amino acids and ammonia, etc. And then that needs to be changed so that we can have nitrates or nitrates again, and that's NO2. So there's recycling of dead material to go back into the soil, to go back into the atmosphere, so that it can be used over and over again to be recycled. Okay, nitrogen cycle, very important. Carbon cycle, you know that as well. CO2 goes into the atmosphere. Plants use it. We are very glad. We need to decrease the CO2, but then people cut down trees and obviously use motor cars and all of those things, and then it puts the CO2 back. Burning of fossil fuels and wood. Decomposition of animals, it gives us more CO2 again. But then obviously the plants use it. It is very important. So go and have a look. What is photosynthesis? That's the process where plants use CO2 and water to make glucose and oxygen. What is cellular respiration? That's happening inside the animals to get energy. Cellular respiration is when we use H2O6, you can't see, plus oxygen, and that makes CO2 plus water. So in photosynthesizing, we are using CO2 and water to make this, and then when it's inside your body, then what we do is we use the sugar and we use the oxygen for cellular respiration to make energy. And then water vapor and CO2 is you breathe it out of your body. Just go and have a look at the different terms. All right, oxygen cycle, you know that as well. Oxygen is available in the atmosphere. We use it, plants absorb it. We can get oxygen inside the water. It's stored in some types of minerals. And then also the algae and the phytoplankton, it's very important because it produces oxygen for us. Plants on land, plants in water, very important. Go and have a look, oxygen cycle. All right. Now, the last section of the test is about biodiversity and classification. There's a little bit of history involved here. Now, this guy that you can see here with his wig is called Carl Linnaeus. You can also see he lived way back, 1707 to 1778. And this guy was very interested in nature and flowers and organisms, and like some of us, we always like things to be neat and sorted and to be in a group. We put the things that belongs together in a group according to their function, or sometimes according to their color, or whatever the case may be. It all depends on the purpose, but we classify them. We group them into groups where they belong. All right, so Carl Linnaeus was actually the first scientist that started this system. We call it the binomial classification. As you ladies and gents know, bi means two. Okay, so he divided, or he gave what we have, the binomial system. So we're going to look at two things. I'll show you now. The first thing that you must remember is that all these scientific names, it is written in Latin. Now you will say, my goodness, Latin. Who understands Latin? Now, in those days, many people could understand Latin. Okay, it's almost like English today. There's lots of different languages, but most people can understand English. Now, in those days, it's the same. Now, imagine if I'm talking about a lion. In English, it's a lion. Afrikaans, it's leeu. Sesotho, it's tau. So, when scientists talk about something and they're using different languages, then there's confusion. How are you going to repeat an experiment if your scientific name has a different name in every language? It doesn't work. So Latin was used so that there's a common language in science, which is Latin, and then there's no confusion. That's why they started with Latin. And this is just an example of the papers, the books that Carl Linnaeus, his work that he produced or printed. And then very, very important, this section I want to show you. Here is Tyrannosaurus rex, a dinosaur, and that is the genus name. and the species name. The genus name always comes first, the species name is second. You need to remember this, ladies and gents, because it's important for grade 12 as well. And now you can see here the font, I want to say the way that the words, the letters are printed, it's different from the others. They are more, lying towards the right. We call it italic. It is to show that this is a species, a scientific name. So when you will read it in your paper, it will be in a different font. But then when you have to write it, you have to underline it. How are we going to know now that you are writing in italics? Ne? You have to underline the genus and the species name. The first one, the genus name, is always with a capital letter. The next one is always with a lowercase letter. Okay, so I say again, genus comes first, species comes second. And when you write it in your paper, you must underline it to indicate that you know it is a genus and species name. Okay? Father of classification, Carl Linnaeus, we call his system the binomial system. So in between there were other scientists as well that decided to divide all the different groups, but then the group that the classification that we use today is the 5 kingdoms. We have 5 kingdoms. We divided everything on earth in 5 kingdoms, and you will know that. We have the animal kingdom. We have the plant kingdom, the protists, the fungi, and then the bacteria. So way back, people decided to put these organisms in these different groups according to certain criteria. They looked at the cell structure, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. I will explain that now as well. Meaning, these cells, prokaryotic, that means before there's a nucleus, so there were no nuclei here. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus. Eukaryotic cells, meaning true nucleus, these cells, they have nuclei, okay? Then the complexity of the body structure. Is it unicellular, meaning there's only one cell? When there's just one cell, it's not very complex. But when it's multicellular, it's more complex. It's more differentiated, okay? Then the next one, they look at nutrition. How do you eat? Are you making your own food, autotroph? Are you waiting for somebody else to make your food, like you at home? You wait for your mom to make your food. You're a heterotroph. You do not make your own food. And then the next one is ecological lifestyle, producers, decomposers, consumers. We've talked about that. And then how they all come together, phylogenetic relationship. A diagram to show us the relationship between them, where we had evolution, where we had variety and mutations, and how things have changed. So you must know the 5 kingdoms. If we give you pictures, you must be able to identify and tell us where they belong. All right. Now, when we see something new, you find something there where you live and you want to identify it, then a scientist use what we call taxonomic keys. Taxo refers to a certain section, group, taxo. It's a simple tool used to identify a specific object. Here in the picture you can see this woman is looking at this part of a tree, a pine tree, and it's trying to identify where it belongs. Okay, so scientists use keys. This is an example of a dichotomous key where you use a step-by-step recipe to determine where or what the name of this animal is. Like for instance, this one is about birds, and you can see they have different beaks. Now, you start at number 1 and you look, they say the beak is relatively long and slender. Now, when I look at them, the beak that is relatively long and slender will be bird W, and there they give a name already, so that bird is identified with this scientific name, and you can say bird W is a Certidia. Okay, then 1B, the beak is relatively stout and heavy. When I look at this, I would say that this is stout and heavy. And then they say, go to number 2. I go to number 2. They say the bottom surface of the lower beak is flat and straight. Is this one flat and straight? No, it's not. The bottom surface of the lower beak is curved. Go to number 3. Then I go to number 3. The lower edge of the upper beak has a distinct bend, and there's the scientific name. So this is almost like a treasure hunt. It guides you. If your teachers ask you something like this, it guides you to identify the species. It's just a practical way for you to understand how this works. All right? Now, just quick, ladies and gents, diagnostic features of the 5 groups. Sorry, this falls off. Let's just put it back. Diagnostic features. The first one is the bacteria. There's a picture of bacteria, E. coli. Now, terminology again, people, and if you are tired, you can pause the video now. You can go and drink some water, cool drink, eat something, and you can come back. So you will forgive me if I just take a sip of water quickly. And then we can carry on. Bacteria, smallest living organism. That is very important because a virus is not living, although it's also small. It is unicellular, just one cell. It's a prokaryote, no definite nucleus. These are terms that you must go and study. Autotroph, they make their own food. There can be heterotrophs. They are unable to make their own food. They depend on somebody else to make the food for them. Like, for instance, parasites. I sometimes say the children at the tuck shop are parasites. They obtain food from others, and in that process they harm them. They take your food and then you don't have any. Okay, so parasite is an organism that takes the food and then they harm the host in the process. Then saprophytes, sapro meaning dead. So these organisms, they get their food from dead plants and animals. So when we look at bacteria, all of these things are relevant for this group, the kingdom of bacteria. Next one, Protista. Now, Protista sometimes feels, as if this group is just to take all the leftovers. If they didn't fit in all of the other groups, we just chuck them in this one, the Protista kingdom. Because look here, I have 3 examples, okay, and they don't look the same, okay, they are different. So we have unicellular and multicellular. We have eukaryotes where they have a definite nucleus. That's what we can say here. We have algae where there's chlorophyll. Like this is a green one, you can see there's chlorophyll. We have protozoa where there's no cell walls and they lack pigments. Like this one. There's no cell walls, it has a strange shape, and there's no pigments, it's translucent. And then we have molds that's producing spores. Look here. Here it looks like a fanned plant that's on the rock. Lichens, ne? And then they form spores to reproduce. So this is the Protista. The next one, the fungi. Fungi you will hear a lot about. There we have the bread mold, the rhizopus at the top. So when you leave the bread for some time or you put it in a plastic bag and there's condensation of water, there's food for the fungi. They will actually get the sugar in the bread. There's sugar in bread, there's starch in bread, and it will get the temperature when it's nice and warm in a plastic bag, and then obviously the water that is now condensing against the plastic bag. So everything that the fungi needs, it will be in there, food, water and heat. And then it forms these different, the sporangiophore, the sporangium, and then the spores can be reproduced there, and then they just start growing again, forming rhizoids there. Okay. Then here we have the mushrooms. This is a nice picture just to show you how the spores are now deposited there, okay, at the right time. Here we have a picture of an agar plate, and what organism that's growing on there, you can see that is penicillin. Penicillin is very important. That is used as antibiotics, a medicine, Penicillium notatum. That is how they look. And they grow on a surface or a substrate here that we call agar. This is an agar plate, a growth medium. And there it shows you how it grows. Okay, so let's have a look again. Some of the fungi are like plants. They have cell walls and they can be uni, one or multicellular. They are different from plants, they don't have chlorophyll. Some of them are heterotrophs, they cannot make their own food, and some of them are parasites, they get their food from another organism, and in the process, they harm that organism. Then we also get pathogens. Pathogens cause disease, and then again the saprophytes, where they get their food from dead plants and animals. That is the fungi. Then you know this one is easier. Plants, plantae, the plantae kingdom, all the different plants, they have cell walls, they have multiple cells, they are differentiated, they are green, in other words, they have chlorophyll, they are autotrophs, they are the producers, they are making the food, and then they are vascular or non-vascular, meaning they have xylem and phloem, they have those tubes that's going to bring the water or bring the food, and then some of them will have seeds, and some of them will have cones. Here you can see there's a pine tree with the cones, and there we have the fern that you're also going to talk about in grade 11. Plants, 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 plants. Now, the last one is animals. You know all about animals. There is a huge variety of animals. They can be marine animals in the water, terrestrial, on earth, aerial, they can be in the sky, multicellular, many cells, meaning they are differentiated, they are specialized, they have specialized cells. There's no cell walls, that's the difference between animals and plants. There's no chlorophyll unless you think you are green. And then we have vertebrae and invertebrate, and otherwise they have a backbone, spine, or they don't. Okay, so that's the 5 groups, ladies and gents, and we are finished with another topic here. Now the last one, history of life on Earth. Now, the first thing that you need to remember is that people are still not, they do not think, so everybody's got a different idea, let me say this. Some scientists, they do not all work together. You must know how people are. So they do not agree always. So there's different viewpoints, but in general, this that we are looking at now, this is, they have consensus about this. Okay, so here we have a nice picture of the Earth. Let me just do this. And then you can see people say that because of an increase in the oxygen levels, it created life. Okay, so this is now the science. And they say also because these oxygen levels increased, that led to diversity. Diversity meaning many different types of living organisms. So they say because of oxygen, at first life started. And then more and more oxygen, that caused different types of animals to start. That is what they say. Okay. Then what happened? You all know about, you watched the movies Ice Age, and then you will know that this is a glacier. Okay, now glacier is a large sheet of ice, and it's formed because it's very cold. Now, the cooling of the earth, the sudden cooling of the earth, it formed the ice ages. And that is now long periods of extremely cold weather. Not just when it's cold in the Free State, it is extremely cold. It's sub-zero temperatures, not sub-zero, sub-zero temperatures. Okay. So in history, there's 4 identified, 4 ice ages where some of the animals and plants that were supposedly here died. You don't have to know that, just have a little bit of background. Okay. Then also in the history of life, we talk about continental drift. Now it's just what it says, continents drifting. Okay. Like drifting when you fall asleep, I lose you. Ne? Now here's the continents. There they show us South America. There's Africa, where we are. India, Antarctica, Australia. So way back in the beginning, there was one big landmass, Pangaea. And then Pangaea divided into 2, Laurasia, Gondwana. Now Laurasia is the northern continent. Gondwana is the southern one. Obviously, when you look here, you'll see it's the southern. Now they say Antarctica was once close to the equator. Now when you look here in this area, I mean nowadays here's Africa. So when we look at the equator, Antarctica, you can't believe that that is actually the case. But when you see here's evidence fossils that they found showing that way back there were different climates, and that is our proof that these continents way back they were connected or closer to one another, and then they started to drift away and we had tectonic plates moving, etc. But this also makes up the history of life on Earth. All right. Another thing, biogeography. Bio meaning biology, geography, earth, plants, animals. So when you look here, they show us the past and the present distribution of species. All of these animals, all of these birds, they are flightless birds, meaning they have feathers but they cannot fly. You know the ostrich that we have in Africa, the rhea in South America, the emu Australia, the kiwi New Zealand, and in Papua New Guinea we have the cassowary. So all of them are flightless birds, and we know that they originated, they talk about ancestor, they share a common ancestor, but it shows us that there's similarities. Okay, it's part of the history. Then, ladies and gents, the last thing that's important for week 1 up to week 9, what you need to study for your test, is the last thing is the geological time scale. Now, this is a time scale. It's not like your watch or calendar that you can buy at P&A or somewhere. This is a time scale to try and make sense when we say something happens or happened millions of years ago, because it's very difficult to understand the concept of million years ago. MYA, million years ago, not MIA, missing in action, like some of you will be by now, million years ago. Okay, there we have it, million years ago. So if they say it's 1.6 million years ago, it's not as much as 3,500 million years ago. So this is closer to now, this is very long ago. Now what you need to know is you need to study the name of the 3 eras. There's the eras that they talk about, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, and Paleozoic. Now, Meso always means middle. The word Meso means middle. Cenozoic means new or recent, and that is closer to recent, to now. So, Cenozoic is the era closer to now. Mesozoic is in the middle, and Paleozoic is ancient. It's a long time ago. And then all of these eras, they will be divided into periods as well. But that you don't have to study, though you must know the 3 eras. Here you see the time, and there they have key events. When humans evolved, the extinction of the dinosaurs, you will know about Jurassic, because of the movie Jurassic Park, you will know the word. Permian extinction, invertebrates became common, and this era or time zone that we have here is called Precambrian, before Cambrian. Okay, if you're interested, you can go and read about it a little bit, but for our purposes, you just need to study the 3 eras. Okay, ladies and gents, now I'm going to look at some questions as well. Just a few, because you have to practice most of this on your own. But before we do that, very important, there will be a question about scientific method. Now, I think some of you now, you want to start crying or develop some sort of an illness when we say scientific method. But have a look. We have a skeleton here, and this skeleton will help you to understand. Okay, here's a big bundle of joy, and here's a big bundle of joy. I'll be quick. Okay, so first of all, what happens? You see something, and you wonder about it, and you ask a question. How is this happening? Why, when, what, or where? So if they ask you to write a scientific question, you look at your experiment that they are providing, and you ask a question. And how do you ask a question? You start with these words. Now, the scientific question will be the same as your aim, because you're going to determine or investigate. So if they ask you what is the aim in the experiment, you look for these 2 words to determine, blah, 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 or to investigate. And then there will be two variables. And those two variables are always very important. Okay, we have the independent variable and we have the dependent variable. Now the independent variable, when I can quickly draw this, the independent variable will be on the x-axis because that is the one that you can control. And then the dependent variable will be on the y-axis always and forever, and that is the result. That is what you want to test, okay, what you can measure. Now, some other variables, the fixed variables, okay, they need to stay the same. If they don't stay the same, then you can't test what you want to test. Okay, so if they ask you about fixed variables, it's all of those things that must stay the same in the experiment the whole time. Okay, then the normal scientific method includes method, results, discussion, and conclusion. To write your conclusion, you refer back to your aim, and then you write your conclusion. Something else that we love to ask is a hypothesis. That's an educated guess about the outcome of the experiment, what you think will happen. So there's more than one answer or possibility. So you will always have an A and a B section in your hypothesis. And it must include the dependent and independent variable. And we would like it if you use words like increase, decrease, okay, in your sentence that you use. Here is some examples. You can get it from your teacher. Practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. This is available to you so that you can use that. Okay, we have talked about independent, dependent variable, and then the fixed variables, the one that you need to control. And then lastly, that's also important, reliability and validity. Ladies and gents, this is important, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, all the way to the top. So whenever they ask you about what makes an experiment reliable, you will say you have to repeat the experiment. You need to do it more than once. You can't just do something once and say, okay, but this is now true. If you repeat it over and over and you get the same result, you know that it is reliable. And then also increase the sample size. You can't measure the pupil of one woman and then say, yes, but it's reliable. The more you test and get the same answer or the effect that you guessed will happen, then it becomes reliable. Okay, and then there's another one, validity, that can confuse you sometimes. Now, validity is all about how the experiment was carried out. Okay, those things that were supposed to be the same, were they the same? Okay, so here they tell you, validity therefore speaks to whether the scientific research method was done with the appropriate care and diligence. Was it done right? Okay, that you keep the things fixed that were supposed to be fixed, so that your experiment is now valid. Okay, and then also something that they like to ask you, planning an investigation. This is more towards grade 12, but you can have a look because the teachers are going to start to expose you to this so that you can get used to this. What do you do when you plan an experiment? What is the ethical issues? If you want to use photos, you need permission to take photos. You need permission to talk to people. The logistical arrangements, what is the equipment that you're going to use? What is the materials that you're going to use? If you, for instance, going to draw blood, you need permission first, and secondly, you need the correct people that is most now trained to do this, and you need the correct equipment. And then the method, how you're going to do it, and then when you have all the information, how you're going to collect, record, analyze, and present the data. Okay, all of these things you may think is a pain in the behind, but that, ladies and gents, will be asked to you in every single formal test or practical test or exam up to grade 12. Okay, and I'm almost finished, ladies and gents. I know you are tired, but luckily you can stop the video. We can't, so here we go. This is an old formal test. You can see here September 2017. So the content is a little bit different, but I just want to show you. It always starts with short questions, multiple choice. So when there's a question, let's do this one for instance. Which of the following describes a community within an ecosystem? Let me just do this, make this flat. Okay, hope you can see nicely. Then you look at your 4 options. Okay, now let's say for instance, they say community. So if you know your definitions, you will know for sure that a community will be all of the species in that area. Now they say all animals, all plants, the total number of one species. So one of them will always be wrong and others will be there to confuse you. So the correct answer here is C, all the plants and animals in an area. So when you approach multiple choice, you look for the one that you immediately know is incorrect. You scratch it out. And let's say for instance, there's 2 left, then you have a 50-50 chance, if you don't know the correct answer immediately, to guess it. Okay, but never leave the question open. A, B, C or D, you have a choice. Even if you don't know what is the answer, don't leave it, write it, please. If there's nothing to mark, we can't mark. Okay, then you will have a terminology question, always and forever, where we give you the definition and you have to tell me what it is. Like for instance this one, a group of food chains that's arranged to show how feeding of organisms is connected. We call that the food web. Okay, so that is what you write. Remember, in this section you cannot use abbreviations because it's terminology. Can't take shortcuts, you must write out the word. Okay, and if it's spelled incorrectly, if we at least can make out what you want to say, maybe we will be nice to you and give you the mark at first. But if your spelling confuse us that it is now referring to another term in life sciences, then unfortunately we can't be nice to you, then it is wrong. Okay, and then 1.3, always fit column A to column B, or 1 or 2 like this. Very important, only A, only B. You can say both A and B or none. That is your options. Okay, so when we look at this one, I'm going to take one that's relevant for us. The part of the earth where life is found. You remember atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere. And when I look at this, it is in the atmosphere life, it is in the hydrosphere. So it's going to be both A and B. And that is what you write. That is your section A. Okay, here we have a blood question. Here we have a heart question, which is not relevant. Here we have a sand question. You know that. So first of all, this is the investigation question that we have. Okay, so let's have a look. Formulate a question. Now to formulate a question, I have to go and look what is being investigated. What is this investigation about? A scientist designed an experiment to investigate the water holding capacity of sand, loam and clay soil. So that is my aim. That is also what's going to help me to make a hypothesis, and that gives me my dependent and independent variable as well. Okay, so let's have a look. If I now have to turn this into a question, formulate an investigative question for this experiment, what did we say? We say our question must always start with how, which, when, what, why, etc. Okay, so easy one here will be is you can say which soil type has the best water holding capacity. And you're asking a question, so there's going to be a question mark. That's 2 marks. Okay, and then dependent and independent variable. When I look at a table, many times the independent variable is in the first column. Not always, but many times. And then the dependent variable is the other one. Okay, if you don't know, if you struggle with the table, then you do this. You now think for yourself, if you have to draw this, if you have to draw a graph, time will be on the x-axis. And most of the time is on the x-axis, depending on your experiment. But for us, so time will, if you guess it's the independent variable, you will be correct. Sorry, you couldn't see that. Okay. The independent variable, I want to know what is the filtrate, what is the amount of water that's coming through for sand, loam and clay. So that will be my water holding capacity will be there. I will have 3 different numbers there if I just use the last one. Okay, so the volume of the filtrate, that is our dependent variable. Now the 3 variables that should be kept constant, remember what did we say? What must stay the same? Now when we go and we read here, a scientist designed an experiment to investigate the water holding capacity of sand, loam and clay soil. A soil sample of each soil type was placed in funnels lined with filter paper. 100 cubic centimeters of water was added to all 3 soil samples at the same time, and the filtrates were collected in measuring cylinders. The results are shown in the following table. So a very easy one to say, what should be kept the same. There they give me one. The time must be kept the same. And the other thing that I know is that each of them were given 100 ml of water. So they received the same amount of water. Okay? Then when I take sandy soil, when I take loam soil, when I take clay soil, I must use the same amount. I can't take a lot of this and a little bit of this and medium amount of this. I need to use the same quantity of each soil type. So those are the things that must be kept constant. And then when I have to formulate a conclusion, then I go back to the aim to investigate the water holding capacity. So I use that to give my result. And what can I see here? Which one kept most of the water back? That would be clay soil. So I will say clay soil has the best water holding capacity, and that is then my conclusion. Okay, ladies and gents, if you can't find papers where you, without the essay question, just look at the essay question if it's relevant, because look here, this one is 17 marks. And the question is divided into 2 sections. Briefly describe the processes involved in water cycle and the importance. So, and we have an A section and a B section. So it will be divided into 2 sections. Let's say, for instance, this one will count 5 marks and that one can count 8 marks. So still your teachers can ask you, if you have all the papers that you practice this, but now they will be divided into shorter questions. Okay, where you can discuss this. They can ask you this one, briefly describe the processes involved in the water cycle. And then you will discuss precipitation, transpiration. You will talk about capillary water. You will talk about the water that goes into the soil and how it soaks in or how it leaches. Transpiration, evaporation, precipitation, distribution, absorption, those things you will talk about, ladies and gents. So if I can just have you back here with me after this long session. Grade 10s, it is very important that you do practice the different types of questions. I now just scratched the surface here. You need to take it, and if you don't understand how to approach a certain question, you need to ask your teacher to assist this as well. Nothing is coming to you like diffusion. You can't do this and think it's going to come into your head. First you have to sit and you have to study the facts, and secondly you have to practice this. So I know you get tired. We are there in this whole fight with you. So please, grade 10, study and ask if you don't know. Hang in there, stay safe and do your best. Thank you.